So, you want to roll a witch, huh? You want to be a mighty mistress of your own personal army of the undead? Or you want to become a she-demon herself? Rain fire on the land of exile? Or do you want to be a blood mage? Well, everything you need to know here is going to be shown today as we are covering the witch. This is some early gameplay and breakdown of what you can expect from the witchcraft. It's a deep dive from Goblin Inc. Again, another person who got access to try this early. For those of you who, if you don't know what to play or what you want to do with the witch, this could give you your own type of launching pad. Maybe even see where you can build on. I haven't watched this. I haven't fully watched the video. I just lightly skimmed to see if this was legit gameplay and overview of the class. And that way we can cover what you can expect from the witch. See what his gameplay is from the test that he went to go and do.
The Witch in PoE 2 is the most interesting minion class I've ever played in an ARPG, but this class goes so far beyond minions. I got to go to an event in LA recently where I got to play the Witch for about 6 hours. I got to interview the developers where I largely talked to them about Witch. And today we're going to go over everything I learned from that. And we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that was revealed in today's live stream. So in this video, we have all of the Ascendancies. We have all the skill gems. We have the passive tree. We have basically everything you could possibly want for Witch. And at the end, we even have a little bit of a bonus thing where we're going to be talking about the complete Scepter rework. So starting with the Ascendancies, we're first going to talk about the Infernalist. This is a fire and demon focused specialization that can shapeshift your character into a demon,
fire
which
and
gives you
demon.
crazy mobility and lots of extra
fire
damage.
witch.
Or you can focus more on something like the Hellhound summon, which is more minion focused. And the Hellhound is going to do AoE fire damage. It's going to absorb incoming damage that you take from hits. And overall, this is like, you can kind of get the theme of this, right? But what's interesting is when I spoke to developers, they did say that this is going to be the main minion specialization for the Witch.
If so, there you go. Of course, you're free to do whatever you want, but if you're going for full-on minion build, this would be the tree. This is very much then like demonology from World of Warcraft, and you know, bodies done that, where that was the minion tree. Like they switched it. No, and then you could turn to basically bootleg a demon. So, yeah, if you are heavy up, you're going hard with the minion, this would be the ascension that you would choose. This would be the ascendancy that you would choose is the bringer of flame. Forgot the name of this ascension.
Now we'll see, how that ends up playing out, but that is what they told me. The other specialization is a blood and bone specialization that immediately makes all of your skills cost life as well as mana, but it gives you access to a lot of different healing. So it seems like whenever you kill enemies, they actually like drop blood orbs that you can pick up to heal yourself, and this skill tree also has access to life steal
High
and
risk, high
access to
reward.
different damage multipliers. Now, one thing that's interesting is this does give you extra damage based on maximum life, which is kind of cool, and they also showed some extra nodes that do give more maximum life, but I didn't really see anything in the blood and bone tree that really stuck out to me. I have a feeling that we kind of maybe missed some of the major nodes, so we're going to have to see more of how that plays out when we can see the full tree, but with
that tree's probably going to have to be careful, especially when you're fighting a boss that has no ads. Ain't no ads to get the life back. It's gonna be high risk, high reward. That's gonna be one of those trees where if you go that route, you need to know what you're doing. Not saying it's terribly hard, but every move you make is killing you, literally.
With that being said, we're going to be jumping into the skill gems now, starting first with the minion skill gems. Now, the way that skills are organized in Path of Exile 2 is essentially, it's effectively by class, but it's sorted by weapon. So what we're going to be looking at is the Scepter skills technically, but they're really like the Witch skills. That's kind of the idea. So for starters, we have the basic
Scepter skills or the Witch skills?
These guys just run around. They
Keep
seem
that in
to
mind.
taunt like small white mobs, but they don't seem to taunt bosses, and they don't seem to taunt larger mobs. But yeah, they do seem to hold threat against trash mobs, so there's going to be some value in this. And one thing to really keep in mind as we're like diving into all this and discussing all these different pieces of Witch, this is a class that's designed to have like minion builds where the minion is the core piece of the build. It's also designed to have spellcaster builds where you don't play with minions at all, but it's also designed to play with hybrid builds where you're playing primarily as a spellcaster, but you're using minions for various support. So keep that in mind when you're kind of thinking about these skills. The next minion is the most powerful early game minion, which is the Skeletal Sniper. This dude gives a lot of damage. It's a ranged auto attack that does physical damage, but you can give it the Pierce support room, which allows it to have very good AoE. It can summon a Poison Cloud, and then you can give the Poison Cloud Armor Shred, so it's able to absolutely decimate enemies' armor. And because the attack damage of your minions is so low, shredding the armor of enemies actually ends up being a pretty big damage increase. Overall, actually, I found snipers to be the best early game minion. And
you would think so.
Position ended up just being 7 skeletal snipers just stacked up. And while we're kind of on the topic of it, I do also want to talk a little bit about the way that minion ranks work, and if you're not familiar with minions, how they work in general. So the basic idea is that minions cost spirit to summon, and you have like a baseline level of spirit. The spirit is coming from your Scepter in large part, but it's also coming from a few other sources, and every minion has a different spirit cost to have it.
So the spirit cost is different than the mana cost. Is different. These are called, they use some of them from mana. Wonder what made them change that.
Out, and you can basically customize your army and spend however much spirit you want to get exactly how many guys you want of each different type. And so what's really interesting about minions, and the thing that makes them very weird, is actually the more ranks of a specific minion you get, so the higher the rank of the skill gem, the cheaper the minion becomes. But, and I confirmed this from the developers, the stats and damage of the minions, the health of the minions also scale with levels. So you have a double factor scaling with minion ranks where they're getting more health and they're cheaper to summon, which means you can have more of them. So minion ranks end up being really important.
That's gonna be broke.
You know, if you're looking at the stats, you're seeing this reservation. That's what this is in reference to. It's in reference to the spirit cost.
The spirit that costs.
Summon the minion. The next spell is Unearth.
Gonna be broke again.
Is a really cool minion spell. Basically, you're gonna do a frontal of physical damage, like in a cone in front of you, and any corpses in that cone will get turned into like little like bone scorpions. Those dudes do loads of damage. This skill is ridiculously powerful for mapping and for like, you know, general like AoE clearing, but it feels really weak on bosses because you don't have enough corpses.
You don't have any dead people.
Now, I did get confirmation that there will be an aura that you can toggle that costs spirit to reserve and will spawn corpses regularly. That will be better against bosses. I don't know if it'll actually be worth it to run it, but Unearth in general, especially like in the early game, fantastic for farming, not so good for bossing. Now, the Skeletal Arsonist is really interesting. So it's a fire
that would sound like that would be the mob, the boss one.
That just do like, you know, single target damage, but it has the ability to eat your minions to do ginormous amounts of AoE. Now, what's great about this is it can only eat low health minions, but this is
ones that are about to die.
HP value, so it's not like when they're at 20%. It's actually based on the overall maximum health. And what's interesting is when you pair it with the Unearth minions by default just have less health than what the Skeletal Arsonist needs to activate. So as long as you have the Unearth minions out, you can immediately eat them with Skeletal Arsonist,
which will do the Unearth
AoE fire damage. Now, one combo I didn't get
it feeds itself
because I missed this is that the Skeletal Sniper can summon a Poison Cloud that does AoE damage like poison, but you can actually blow this up with what it calls a detonator skill.
Gonna be the year of the Necromancer all over. Year of the Witch all over. Necromancer. Hell. That's what it is. It's gonna be year of the Minion Witch all over again.
Doing a lot of damage. And this skill
I'm not mad. It's just
we're detonate on the Arsonist. So I think
most games Minion builds are very strong in ARPGs. It is what it is. This is no different.
The idea is
this is actually one of the more stronger ones.
Make the little constructs with the Unearth
and Path of Exile
put
one.
Out the poison with the archers, and then you blow up the construct with the Arsonist, which also blows up the Poison Cloud, and so you're getting a double dip explosion of damage. And then you can also put support gems that make it so whenever your minion dies, it explodes for AoE. You have all of these stacking things that you can get. This actually seems like a pretty decent setup. This might be competitive with pure Archer for early game, but I didn't get to test it. Now, the next piece is very interesting. So this was featured in the Path of Exile like Witch video, which is the Pain Offerings. So what offerings are is that it allows you to sacrifice your skeletal minions, and skeletal minions by default will resummon themselves. I believe it's every 7 seconds, baseline, every 7. But every time one skeletal minion dies, it resets the timer. So it'll be like 7, 6, 5, minion dies, back to 7, 7, 6, 5. And so it's actually, it can be kind of difficult to resummon your army. We're going to talk more about that later. But this pain offering allows you to immediately sacrifice a minion, and so it'll start the timer, and then it'll give your minions 30% attack speed and cast speed, and also give them a 29% damage multiplier. Remember, this is more damage, so it's a multiplier.
Oh boy, I'll just hear plus multiplier plus. Oh man. He did say it could cause an issue with you resummoning your army, but we'll see if he could.
It's got a 6-meter AoE, which is pretty big, but it's not ginormous. So you do
30% increased attack and cast speed, or grants minions 29% more damage.
But
and this is level 5, requires level 14.
With a 30% attack speed buff, so this is extremely powerful. Raise Zombie allows you to turn corpses into zombies, and this is pretty okay. The thing is, I just find it to be too slow.
Zombies tend to be weak.
To Unearth, because Raise Zombie is only one target at a time, whereas the Unearth you can hit multiple targets at once. So it feels a lot better for like speed farming. The zombies are like technically stronger though, so like I guess if you were doing content, that'd be better. But the problem is that zombies also don't really work on the boss.
They need
bodies. You're in a situation where like I feel like it feels like Unearth is like always better than Raise Zombie, but there is one cool thing about Raise Zombie, which is that you can use power charges to summon them without having a corpse. So if you aren't familiar, in PoE 2, power charges are completely reworked. So power charges are now, you gain them, you store them, and they don't do anything. But if you cast a spell that can consume power charges, it will consume them and empower the skill. So with the zombie, they take 30% less damage when you cast a power charge.
I could tell by him using the bone move. This is the other Ascension, and you see he is still using the minions. So you can go the other way if you want. It's just if you really want to go full minion, your best bet would probably be the demon tree, as I'll call it.
He does 100% more damage with his hits, and he's got 25% more movement speed. The other thing that's really interesting is
that's a bone spike.
You don't need a corpse to summon it if you have a power charge. So in theory, against boss fights, right, you should be able to raise zombies and resummon them without using power charges. And one other thing I want to mention, by the way, these zombies and the Unearth minions do not cost spirit to summon. It's only the skeletons that cost spirit because they resummon themselves and don't require any investment to summon them. The next minion is very interesting. This guy felt very powerful, but he has a ginormous drawback that I think takes it from being like one of the best minions to being kind of mid.
So there's a minion with a drawback?
The skeletal mages are really cool. So they're frost mages. They do
frost surviving skeletal frost mages that come in and cast
chill. They get frozen, and then they have a ginormous AoE active that they just drop like an ice bolt on the ground and explodes.
100% more effective
you need
chill.
2 ice bolts to stun enemies. So as long as you have 2 mages, you can go tap, 2 ice bolts, stun everything, and then they just shoot everything down, right? In theory, frost mages are very powerful. They actually feel amazing. The problem is, when you kill frozen enemies, they don't drop corpses, which means you don't have fuel for Unearth. The other problem is, like, CCing bosses takes forever. Like, to freeze a boss with frost mages takes ages. So against boss fights, they feel kind of weak. And in AoE, they deny your corpse generation, which means you can't make use of Unearth, which feels like one of the best, like, mapping spells. So
the resounding message I am seeing here is bosses. Minion build is going to struggle with bosses because the resource for the minions is the corpses, and you may not have it. You do have something that you can summon with spirit, but if you run out of spirit and you don't have it, and everything is and everything is pushed into minions, you up a creek without a paddle, right? You crap out of luck. Which is why I would figure that the end part of that Ascendancy tree, you turn into a demon. That allows you to where you can hold your own even if you don't have any minions, where a good chunk of this, your minions is everything, and if your minions aren't cutting it, Crap out of luck.
Frost mages, you know, great AoE, great CC.
But
They just have that really.
that's the thing with minion builds. You put everything is in your minion. So, and we saw from the thing I dropped a couple of the video we covered about sorceress, frost mage and bosses don't work. They're laughing at you while you're trying to freeze them. A lot of these bosses are gonna have high stun thresholds, high chill thresholds. So
rough drawback of not generating corpses. So there's probably gonna be ways to use them, but it's tough. Now, the rest of the minions here, I did not get to play with. So the list, everything you saw above, I got to play with, I got to test, and that's kind of my thoughts. But for the rest of the minions, I'm going to give you the thoughts that I got from the developers when I spoke to them about it. So the Reavers are supposedly the highest damage minions in the game, according to the developers. And this is because you're able to enrage them through their active, which allows them to generate rage on hit, which rage is just a stacking damage multiplier. So they're going to attack really fast, they're going to generate a ton of rage, and the idea is you want to keep them alive as long as possible through like HP regen or something, which you can get on your server, you can get in a few different ways.
This
and you want to try to keep these guys alive so that they can stack
rare.
And if you can pull this off successfully,
They work on most of her
destroy bosses. So this is a fantastic
most of
minion.
his
I didn't get to play with it myself. I imagine it probably struggles a little bit in AoE.
Yeah,
but we'll see. It seems pretty good overall.
Reavers, they're called.
Now the Storm Mage sounds very compelling. It has a ginormous AoE. It applies shock,
41.
which gives you a multiplier. It doesn't have the same drawback as the Frost Mages, where you know enemies are frozen.
Don't leave
so
a body.
Summon corpses. And overall, I'm kind of optimistic to try out Storm Mages for mapping because you know they have a giant AoE. They don't cause they allow enemies to generate corpses, so you can still use Unearth. Pretty excited to try them out. Bone Offering is like the next offering that we're going to talk about. Very interesting. It's basically going to allow you to offer up a minion. It's the same as the other one where you sacrifice a skeleton, and it's going to give all of your minions a shield. And that shield only absorbs like one hit worth of damage, but it's going to mitigate like an entire hit. So in theory, you can time it for like a boss mechanic, right? Because one of the
you don't want to lose it.
Minions get eaten alive by boss mechanics.
Yep.
So this is effectively like a one-hit immunity for minions. So that if you time it well, you can save your minions.
Perfect example: the trailer when you saw the guy summon Master Hand. And the Master Hand slammed and KO'd him. Maybe you can get out of it, and you know your minions are too dumb to get out of it. You would pop Bone Offering, and you would save your minions from that one auto kill move, and you lose your whole minion party. Something like that.
From getting one shot. So this is like kind of interesting. I view this as more of like a bossing skill than anything, but it's definitely interesting. The next offering is a power offering, and you're going to notice this one has a limit of 10. And the other ones all have a limit of 1.
For minion dies, extractions interrupting, you will gain
it. Want, which, you know, when we're talking about minions as a support,
the Bone Spike itself is a minion.
Types of builds, power offering could be really strong, right? Because basically, you can just eat all of your minions to turn them all into power charges. Resummon the minions by default, and then eat them all again, and cast tons of empowered.
So you absorb them to empower yourself.
So the Skeletal Brute, I didn't get a ton of information about from the developers. What I do understand is just what's on this page, which is that he hits enemies and he stuns them, basically. So basically, he can only stun primed enemies. What a primed enemy is basically every enemy in the game has like a stagger bar that slowly fills. So the Skeletal Brute can finish the filling and immediately proc the stun, right? And that's kind of the idea behind these guys. I'm not really sure how strong these guys are. I didn't get to test them, like I said, and get input from the developers. But anyway, that's the idea of these guys. Now, the Clerics, I did get a lot of information about. The Clerics
healers,
super, super interesting. So,
they heal other minions and revive fallen skeletons. That's crazy.
To revive, and every single time one of your skeletons dies, it resets that timer, right? This is really brutal, and you really feel this in a lot of boss fights. And one of the solutions to that problem is to play with Skeletal Clerics. These guys have an active that only has about a 4-second cooldown currently that resummons all of your killed minions. Now, it's just skeletons, right? It's not going to resummon your zombies or your unearthed minions, but it's going to resummon all of your skeletons every 4 seconds, which is pretty clear.
Wow.
Obviously, if the cleric dies, you can't use the active, which is kind of the downside of it. But I'm really curious to try this guy out. It sounds really strong. And he's also got the heal, which, you know, obviously with the Reavers, the idea behind them is, you know,
you want the cleric to heal them.
They do, but also the faster they're bleeding out. So, you know, pairing them with some clerics to keep them alive, pretty interesting idea, right? Be very curious to see how this plays. But these are all of the minions that we have just from skill gems. you know, there's a lot of interesting support gems and stuff. I didn't really want to get into the support gems here because it gets like too deep into it, but I do want to mention one or two. So one that's really interesting is you have a support gem that makes it so after your minion dies, it still survives and can still act for 4 seconds, but it does allow the timer to start ticking. This is really strong for bossing and stuff, really strong early game gem.
I would
But like I
assumed
said,
so.
I don't want to dive too deep into it. I just kind of just want to give you guys kind of an overview of what the minions look like. Now, the next category of skills that we're going to talk about is kind of like the second archetype of Witch. So Witch really seems to have like 3 different main archetypes. You know, the first is Minion, the second is Chaos Dot, and then the third is like physical damage. So let's start talking about like Chaos Dot and what the idea is.
Chaos Dot?
So Contagion is back from PoE 1 with some changes. So Contagion in this game is a pure single target spell, and it bounces whenever that enemy dies. And when it dies, and when it bounces, it's going to multiply the damage of it up to 300%. So it's going to do double damage every time it bounces, up to doing triple damage, which is pretty interesting, right? It's a great mapping spell. This is actually the fastest early game farming ability.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Or anything else you can play is to invest heavily into.
It's like
and so the idea is you put Contagion on one mob, and then
it's like old school chain lightning from Warcraft. Used to fry people.
Is Essence Drain. So Essence Drain is a very powerful skill. It has a strong on-hit effect.
Yeah, it's not damage over time, debuffs enemies.
So the idea is you walk up to a mob pack, you press Contagion, you press Essence Drain. Essence Drain kills the mob. Contagion,
and then the Contagion bounces everywhere else
and kills everything, right? And this becomes really powerful when you pair it with one of the support gems, where every time you cast a spell, it uses 100% of your life and eats that amount of life from a minion, and then it gives the spell a 40% damage multiplier. But if there's no minion to eat, this support doesn't work. It only works if there's a minion with enough.
Yeah, because I'm about to say that would kill you.
It give you a 40% damage buff, which is really strong when paired with these already really hard-hitting spells. These are kind of like your 2 early game spells, right? This is what you're going to be playing early on, and the next group of spells you unlock much later. So I got to play with those first 2, really powerful. But this next one, Dark Effigy, is super interesting. So you're going to summon a totem, and the totem is going to spam apply chaos over time dots to everything around.
They really made this the chaos dot.
Right? And then you also have the
champ also.
Which is AoE curse that gives enemies negative chaos resistance. And remember, all of these dots are all chaos damage. And so you have this curse where you apply an AoE for negative chaos damage. For those of you who might not have played PoE 1, negative resistance is ridiculously strong.
Yes.
Because at worst, this is a 32% multiplier, basically against most mobs. But at best, this is a ridiculous damage multiplier if a mob has a ton of chaos resistance, because this is just a flat reduction. Extremely powerful, right?
Wow.
Profane Ritual. This is a really interesting spell. This is like one of the versions of like Corpse Explosion in this game. So the way that this works is you target a corpse and it starts performing a ritual on it. While that's being performed, the corpse does AoE chaos damage, right? And then at the end of the ritual, it eats the corpse and it gives you a power charge, which allows you to empower like some of your spells. And what's interesting is you can have 5 rituals out at a time. So when you're speed farming and stuff, you can go ritual, and not only is it going to do DOT, but it's also going to give you power charges for summoning minions. So this is really interesting when you pair this with like the zombie, for instance. So in theory, you could use this to like stack up and store a bunch of power charges like before a boss fight, so that when you go into the boss fight, you can summon all your zombies, right? So there's some like really interesting stuff you can do here. Also, just the damage over time itself is it's hard to tell like how high this damage is compared to other skills, because this is a rank 22 gem, whereas like, you know, if we compare it to like Contagion, we're only looking at a rank 5 gem, I believe. Yeah, rank 5 gem. So you're not going to see like the same crazy numbers here. It's 5.4.
It's an early game.
And on Profane Ritual, it's 59.2, so it's over 10 times as high.
Yeah.
We'll see how high the damage actually is, but this is a really compelling spell, right? This is really interesting. Hex Blast is also super interesting. I'm very excited to try this out. But basically, you detonate all of your curses on all of the enemies, and each one explodes and does AoE damage. And you can explode up to 9 corpses per cast. So the idea is you pull in all the mobs, you ramp your curses on them, and then you just Hex Blast, Hex Blast, Hex Blast, and just do crazy AoE damage.
So what I'm getting here, there's a lot of ways throughout the 3 archetypes of the Witch that you are going to be able to damn near speed clear, or be able to mob clearing. And to be honest, which is mob clearing, even if you don't go full minion build, has always been pretty good. So she's always been a pretty good mobber.
This sounds really fun to play. Yeah, it just sounds like a cool spell, honestly. And with regards to curses, by the way, there's more curses we're going to talk about later. You know, obviously we saw the chaos damage, chaos resistance one, but there's also a lot of curses on like the occultist spell gem tree, where they have like, you know, negative resistance to a bunch of different stuff. So there's plenty of curses to work with. There's like negative movement speed curses in some trees. There's all kinds of interesting stuff that we can play with curses. There's more than just what I'm going to show you here. But, you know, like I said, I just want to focus on like what is like witch stuff. Okay. So next,
he's trying trial of the second
bone
as well. You only
skills.
got to get that
And the
one.
bone skills are really
That's the other
They're not
Ascendancy.
really like build enabling skills necessarily. There's probably ways you can make them work, but what makes the bone skills really good is that they're very powerful at utility. And the best example of that is through Bone Cage. So Bone Cage is going to summon an AoE circle around you, and it's only going to last a couple of seconds, but when enemies run into it, they're going to get pinned for like 5 seconds, which means they can't move. It's like 4 or 5 seconds. It is a very, very long CC. It's the longest CC I saw in this whole game, the whole time I was playing. And it does that in an AoE, so when mobs run in, boom, like they're all CC'd. It's super powerful. And yeah, really interesting skill. And this next skill is also super interesting. I played the crap out of this one. I really, really like this skill, which is Bone Storm. So Bone Storm, you charge it up. The longer you charge it, you summon this like row of bones behind you that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like traps.
Oh, that.
And then when it's done, you can release it whenever you want, and they'll all shoot forward, and they do physical damage as like a spell cast. But then they stick into the enemies that they hit.
Called in bleeds?
The next thing that attacks them, which is like a keyword in PoE, right? So it's not any spell. It's got to be specifically an attack, which works with minions, so minion attacks. The next thing that attacks them will proc the bone sphere that's in them and add to its own damage, which means when a minion hits an enemy,
it kind of like detonates.
It's actually going to scale its own damage, which means it scales with all of your minion multipliers. So this is really interesting.
Wow.
Especially when you think about something like Reapers, right? Where Reapers have this huge damage multiplier built into them, and then they're scaling this Bone Storm into a big number. It's also really good in party play. It's, you know, just a good freaking spell, man. The next couple of spells we're going to look at are the kind of like utility spells that don't really fit in anywhere else, but have like really high value. So
that's it for bone skills?
AoE curse that is going to...
That's from Path of Exile 1.
Enemies do reduced damage. Quite a bit of reduced damage, right? At 30%. This is a huge damage.
And good for bosses.
It's still going to give you 16%. It's quite a bit. We've also got vulnerability, which is going to make enemies lose armor, which is also really strong because, you know, you can see how much physical damage that we have. So reducing the armor can actually end up being very effective.
Yep.
Finally, we also have Detonate Dead. And Detonate Dead is a fantastic
another version of Corpse Explosion.
Maximum life.
But it does fire
damage. It does
damage.
have its own base value of damage, but the fact that it does % damage of the maximum life means that you can basically slot this into like any build, and it'll be pretty decent, right? Next,
wow, 20% damage to life. I didn't even notice that they said that.
Some of the more interesting passives. I'm not going to go into every passive on the tree. I just kind of want to talk to you guys about the passives that really kind of, I think, define the playstyle of what they're going for. For which, I want to give you guys an example of like some of the minion multipliers and stuff, and kind of what you can expect to be playing. So for starters, one thing that's very different than other games is that your starting spell nodes and a lot of your minion nodes all throughout the tree are going to read like this one, where it says 8% increased spell damage and minions do 8% more damage. This allows you to spec into minions
you do more damage while you're still worrying about yourself.
Now, you know, as an example, Power of the Dead here, giving them attack speed and damage. This is only hitting minions, right? So it's not every single node that's going to be hitting both minions and you, but a good percentage of them do, especially early on in the tree. Which is
so it seemed like either way, no matter which Ascendancy you pick, it would still be, you know, to dabble a little bit in minions. She doesn't, besides the Witch, doesn't seem like she has a survivability of, say, like a mage or stuff, to where she can actually be able to go a full minionless build, depending on how you build. Of course, there's different possibilities. There's no locked in right or wrong answer, but just by her default, would seem wise to dabble with some sort of minions.
Which is really nice. Makes your leveling a lot smoother. You're also able to get this stat here, which is minions revive 15% faster. This is a very strong stat because it's going to take that 7 seconds and it's going to cut that down to like 6 seconds.
Okay.
And you can stack this to the point where you can get that cooldown down to like 3 seconds, right? And get it to the point where your minions are coming back pretty quick. Also, your minions are inherently really squishy, so these maximum life nodes are very strong. You've also got like standard like movement speed.
These are passives,
nodes,
by
right?
the way,
Like,
that
stuff.
he's showing that you can build into.
We have this really interesting one. 40% increased minion damage while you have at least 2 different active offerings. This is a really interesting node because it's basically trying to push you into the offering playstyle where you might sacrifice 2 minions so that you can buff up your whole army. You give them like the shield. You have a lot of choices for what kind of sacrifices to go for, but not every minion build is going to want to play 2 sacrifices, right? Like almost every minion build is going to want to play 1 for the attack speed and flat damage, but not every single minion build is going to be playing like 2 sacrifices, or sorry, 2 offerings. So some decisions to be made there. You also have this node here, Fear of Death, which is going to give your minions accuracy. I think.
Yes, I forgot about that. Even your minions have to worry about their hits missing.
I think this is mostly for your archers because remember in PoE 2 it's a little bit different than PoE 1 with regards to accuracy. Melee skills hit basically all the time.
Oh.
I think this extends to minions, but I don't know for sure. So I believe this accuracy node is
I missed that. Okay, so rangers. Yeah, so rangers are maybe the mages.
You've also got some interesting stuff where you can, you give your minions
chaos resistance.
You can also convert some of their physical
damage,
which is cool.
Which would then siphon into their chaos resistance.
Cool. So it's called Dead Can Dance, and it basically gives your minions increased evasion rating, and then it gives your dexterity to your minions. Now, this isn't super powerful because dex is, in this game, it is only accuracy, but you can see that you have quite a bit of ability to stack accuracy if you really want to. The next node is from PoE 1.
He just missed that bone. That
your amulet now applies to your minions instead of you.
That bone move.
You get life on your amulet, goes to your minions instead of you. Whatever stats you get on your amulet goes to them.
Okay.
Which is pretty interesting when you start looking at amulets that you can get passives on them from the passive tree. So there's definitely some very funny stuff you can do with this. There's also nodes like Lord of Horrors, which is going to reduce the reservation cost of your minions. I mean, you can have a lot more.
Minions have 12% reservation.
Like elemental resistance, max elemental resistance.
Minions have 20% to all elemental resistance. Minions have 20% to all 40%. Minions have 5% to all maximum elemental resistance. 45. Minions have. Let's do it this way. So 20, 40, 68. 68% elemental resistance. Wait. 70. 70 elemental resistance.
All kinds of cool stuff. You got crit chance and crit damage. There's definitely like different ways you can build their damage, right? Like you can build.
This is getting nasty.
You come down here, they have chance to apply Wither, which.
What is this?
Which is chaos resistance reduction. And you can give them a lot more survivability, more cooldown reduction, all kinds of interesting stuff, right? So you can see like between all of this, there is just a ridiculous number of ways to play minions. There's like an infinite number of ways to play the minion build, and even like beyond minion build, you can see like between the different ascendancies and the different skills. You got this,
didn't really go into the other ascendancy.
This, like, demon form stuff. There's a lot of interesting things to figure out with the Witch, so I'm super excited to play it more. But there's one more thing we got to talk about, which is the Scepter rework. Now, this is really important because Scepters are not at all what they used to be, and their mechanics are very odd. Okay, so it's important to understand
what are we missing?
How these work. So the first thing is that Scepters do not have an attack damage roll, and they don't have like a spell damage roll. So they're not buffing your spells, they're not buffing your attacks. But what they do is give you a ton of spirit, baseline 100 on like a level 1 base Scepter, which 100 spirit is like 3 extra minions, right? This is very strong. You need to play this in a minion build. And the other thing that's interesting about Scepters is they have unique stats that no other item in the game has. So they have things like increased spirit, which increases the spirit from the weapon. Things like allies in your presence deal bonus damage. Allies in your presence get increased attack speed, plus to minion skills. Allies in your presence gain 1 to 4 additional physical damage. These are stats you can't find anywhere else. And from my testing, these stats do not apply to you. They only apply to allies around you. So if you're wanting to play a heavy spellcasting witch, you're going to be going with like double wand. But if you're wanting to play a like minion, you have to go scepter. And because of the power level of scepter, you can no longer dual wield them. Okay, you can only have one scepter.
wow.
So the best thing for leveling is to go one wand, one scepter. But yeah, Scepter's super interesting, and overall, this class is just super interesting. I hope you guys find it as interesting as I do. And yeah, thank you guys for watching.
Okay, my parting advice. That was a lot. I was more quiet as he's just coming with the information, and as he's talking, I'm keeping up and plating it in my head. Once again, the witch is gonna be. I'll be honest. The witch is gonna be the most casual friendly. You want to get your feet wet. You want to get in the path of exile. You don't mind a minion build. You don't mind a. I think the blood route, since you're playing with your health, would be a little bit more, but the minion's gonna have much more better ease of access than the other classes. The mercenary is gonna have a rough beginning, hard beginning, because it's that that just reads slow start. I think minion for like a first tune, first roll champ might work for a lot of people. Some people don't like minion builds. Don't like because like them all of your power, it's keeping them alive and destroy, and they will destroy everything. I'm gonna tell you something right now. The furthest character I got in Path of Exile was a minion. He destroyed everything, and was carrying me pretty easy up until what part of it was that? I dang near got the end game, and then I started to need gear, and my gear was I was starting to get gear checked, but because I went a while without really for what my minions, but I had a thing where my minions were feeding off of my attributes, so but yeah, this is which is still gonna be very strong, very easy to pick up, pick and play. It's not gonna have so much of that stuff that a lot of it's self-explanatory. Look at this. Allies in your presence deal 30% increased damage. Allies in your presence deal 6% increased attack speed. 1 level to all minion skills. You want to go that route? Hey, go for it. Or you can go the dot route, or the bone route, the chaos damage route, chaos dot route, or the bone route, whichever one. All of probably going to be viable. I still think in some way, shape, or form, you're going to still be dealing with the minions to kind of as fodder, keep a lot of the mobs off you, buffer. But yeah. Talk about being strong. Well, damn. Let me know in your comments down below if this is a class that you're looking into. Not saying it's a bad class. It's gonna be a very strong class. Of course, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And this is Revos. I'm outie.